All right, how's it going, everyone? Thanks for watching. Make sure you go ahead and hit the like button under this video. That would be awesome. Anyway, this video, of course, is a continuation of adding and subtracting fractions with unlike or different denominators. Of course, as you see on your screen, the Common Core Standard, NC5 NF1, which is the North Carolina Common Core Standard for 5th grade, which is looking at the first portion, adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators. Therefore, this primarily deals with unlike denominators, this standard. So for a better understanding, I would highly suggest you watching my previous video, which was on adding and subtracting fractions with unlike denominators, as well as watching other previous videos of adding and subtracting fractions, but with like denominators or the same denominators for also a better understanding. Also take note that you can pause this video at any given time, as it may be helpful for you to copy down any information as well as solving any question. Okay. Again, I'm using an app, or rather a website called Braining Camp. So really cool. It has a lot of math manipulatives. But again, let's just dive right into it. So here we're looking at our first problem, 2/3 plus 1/4. So I like to have these visual representations of fractional tiles. I always like to have one whole or something that represents a whole, because working with fractions are parts of a whole. So I need to figure out, if I have 2/3 and I want to add 1/4, how many total do I have? Now, again, if you may remember anything, even from watching my previous video, anytime you're adding or subtracting fractions, the number one thing is you need a common denominator, meaning the same. Right now I have a 3 and I have a 4. Of course, those are not the same. So I need to find something that they have in a number that they have in common. That's called finding your first multiple. One of the things I like to do, of course, is listing your multiples out. Now, multiples basically are like your multiplication tables. You're skip counting. You do not have to write all of them, because again, that would take you forever. But if you list the first few, or however many you can, until maybe you find something they have in common, you're off to a great start. So here, if I'm looking, and I listed my multiples right here. The first one that they actually have in common with each other is 12. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to write that. That's going to become my new denominator, 12. Forgive the writing, but I kind of got it there. Now, what you want to think of is, okay, well, if I have 2/3 and I have 1/4, how can I then have what is called an equivalent fraction with 12 as my denominator? Well, what you got to do is, how can you get from 3 to 12? You want to go ahead and multiply that times 4. And if you recall from my previous video, and I let my students repeat after me, but what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So you multiply the numerator times 4. Therefore, I would end up getting 8 twelfths. 8 twelfths is an equivalent fraction to 2/3. All right. Next, I would do the same thing for this one. How can I get from 4 to 12? Well, I'm going to multiply the denominator, the bottom number, by 3. Therefore, what you do to the bottom, you guessed it, you do to the top. 1 times 3, of course, is 3. So now I have 8 twelfths, and I'm going to add 3 twelfths to that. That, therefore, is going to give me 11 twelfths. Now, the reason why it's 11 twelfths, you are adding your numerators. You are not adding your denominators. Denominators stay the same. Now, let me show you that on a number line as well. Now, if I were to click this and do a number line, I'm going to set this up to twelfths. And I had 2/3. So I'm going to bring that down here. Bring the other one down here. And I'm going to add a 1/4 to it. And notice it stops right at 11 twelfths, which is kind of cool. Another great way of checking this out is, if I were to make a 12th here, I should have an equal amount of twelfths that would match up to these 3 different fraction tiles. So let's see. Right now I have 1, so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I have 11 twelfths. So now I know visually I've done it correctly, because 11 twelfths is equal to 2/3 and 1/4. All right, let's check out another problem. Here I have 2/4. But now I'm going to subtract a third from it. Again, I don't have the same denominator, so I need to find a common denominator. So what I have in common between 4 and 3, the first multiple is 12. So that's going to become my new denominator. Okay. Again, how can I get from 4 to 12? Well, I'm going to multiply the denominator and the numerator by 3. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So 2 times 3, of course, gives you 6. 4 times 3 gives you 12. So this is an equivalent fraction of 2/4. All right, now for 1/3, how can I get from 3 to 12? I'm going to multiply denominator by 4. What you do to the bottom, you do, hey, you're getting the hang of it. Good job. You do to the top. 1 times 4 is 4. Now my answer is not 10/12. Reason being, I am subtracting. I am not adding. So be careful. Make sure you watch your operation. Oh, I almost put an addition sign. See that? Let me put the subtraction sign. So now if I have 6/12 and I'm going to subtract 4 from that, I'm going to end up with 2/12. Now this can be reduced, and it can be reduced, of course, to 1/6. How do I reduce? Again, as I mentioned before, simplifying, you have to find something called the greatest common factor. Your factors are your numbers when multiplied that give you your product. So if I list out my factors for 2, my factors for 2 are 1 and 2. My factors for 12 are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. So the greatest one that they end up having in common is 2. I then divide the numerator and denominator, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top, by 2. 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Again, that's with simplifying. So your first answer you get is 2/12, and then you can simplify and get 1/6. Now let me show you on a number line. So here we have it set up in 12ths. I'm going to do fourths. We have 2/4. All right. Now from that, I need to subtract a third. So let me show you what a third would look like. Basically, I'm going to subtract this here from 2/4. And if you notice, what I have remaining actually is 2/12. But let me show you how that would equate. I'll move it over here. Let me show you how many 2/4, how many 12ths are equal to 2/4. So I'm going to put this here. That's 1, 2, 3. So 3/12 equals 1/4. If I add another 3/12, here I have a total of 6/12. 6/12 is equal to 2/4. Okay. Let me see how many 12ths are equal to 1/3. I'll put a 12th here. All right, that's 1, 2. So all right, so 4/12 is equal to 1/3. Now the problem was 2/4 minus 1/3. So now we know 1/3 equals 4/12. So I'm going to take 4 of these away. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what am I left with? 2/12, which again equals 1/6. And how do I know? I'm going to put out 1/6, and let's see if this will match that. Well, 1/6 popped up there. Let me move it over here. Yep, look, see? 2/12 is equal to 1/6. They match up, they're equal there. All right, let's check out these two problems, and I want you to go ahead and work on these on your own. So definitely feel free to pause the video after I explain a little bit so you can have a chance to work on it. The first problem we have is 3/5 minus 2/10. 3/5 minus 2/10. So I have listed over here multiples for you. Remember, you have to find the least common multiple to have a common denominator. So go ahead and pause the video and try to solve it. All right, hopefully you had a chance to pause this video and go ahead and solve this problem. Again, you need a common denominator. So the denominator, or the multiple rather, that they have in common between 5 and 10 is 10. So hopefully you got that. You're off to a great start. So I'm going to change this and put 10. Okay. Now, how can I get from 5 to 10? Well, you multiply by 2. What you do to the bottom, you do to the... Yeah, you really are getting the hang of it. Good job. You do to the top. 3 times 2 is 6. So 6/10 is equal to 3/5. It's an equivalent fraction. Well, notice here, I have 2/10, so 10 already is my denominator. So I do not need a new fraction. I'm just going to keep it as is. All right, so now we have 6/10 minus 2/10. Now, when you have 6/10 minus 2/10, sorry for the screen blacking out. I'll go ahead and redo that. When you have 6/10 and you subtract 2/10 from it, you are left with 4/10. Now that can be simplified, of course. Do you know the simplified answer to 4/10? Remember your steps. You got to find the greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor between 4 and 10, I'll show you how you list them out. So your factors that give you 4 are 1, 2, and 4. So when you multiply those, 1 times 4, 2 times 2, those are your factors that give you 4. Your factors then that give you 10 are 1, 2, 5, and 10. So 1 times 10 and 2 times 5. So what do they have in common? The greatest one? 2. So now you're going to divide the numerator by 2 and denominator by 2. And you're going to end up getting 2/5. Now let me show you on a number line. And hopefully that's the answer that you got. 2/5, your final answer. But if you got 4/10, you're off to a good start. But make sure you always remember to simplify. That's the very last step. So again, using a number line, we had set it up in tenths. And here, let me change it there. There we go. Set it up in tenths so you can see the lines. We had 3/5. Let me refresh this so that way you can see it. We had, changed everything here. Technical issues, but it's all right. We got it. Here we go. So we had 3/5. 1, 2, 3. Bring them down here so you can see a little bit closer. 3/5, and we're going to subtract 2/10. So let me show what 2/10 looks like. We're going to end up subtracting these from what we have here. Let me show you what it looks like if I were to do that. So if I were to match that up, I notice it ends off what I have left, which is 4/10, and it can be simplified to 2/5. Pretty cool, right? All right, here's one more for you to try. It's a little bit tricky, but it's fun. So pause this video. I want you to go ahead and figure this one out. We have 4/3 plus 1/4. All right, hopefully you were able to pause the video and practice this. It was a little bit tricky, but I'm going to show you basically 2 possible ways that you can solve this by finding a common denominator. Again, you want to list out your multiples. So if you recall, your multiples that we have for 3 and 4, we've done a few of them, but what you may notice, the first one they have in common is 12. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now you can list out your multiples like I showed you. Multiples of 3, skip count, 3, 6, 9, 12. With 4, 4, 8, 12, 16. So you can list that out. The first one we have in common is 12. So I'm going to multiply denominator by 4. That gives me 12. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 4 times 4, and that's going to give me 16. Oh, that's an improper fraction. You're right. But again, I'm showing you 2 different ways. Then 4 times 3. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 1 times 3. And that's going to give me 3. I end up with 16 plus 3 is 19 twelfths. Now, you must remember how to change that. You have to convert it to make it proper, because right now it's improper. So you're going to do 19 divided by 12. Okay, let me change my marker here. So what times 12 can give you 19? The answer, of course, is 1. And then you remember your steps. You divide, and you multiply that. You end up getting, again, I'm using standard algorithm here with just showing you how to convert 19 twelfths. And you're left with 19 minus 12 is 7. You're left with this quotient, which is your whole number. What is remaining becomes your numerator. And again, your denominator, which is 12, does not change. So hopefully you got 1 and 7 twelfths as your answer. Now let me show you another way of figuring this out. If you were to go ahead and change this 4 and 1/3, let's say you wanted to do this option first, right? So you would divide 4 divided by 3, and you're going to end up with 1 and 1/3. So 4 divided by 3. What times 3 will give you 4? Well, only 1. 1 times 3, of course. Here, I'll show you here. 4 divided by 3. Hopefully it doesn't mess up again. And it blacked out again. Oh, this app is having some difficulties here. All right, so we had 4/3. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. And then we're going to divide 4 divided by 3. So 1 times 3 gives us 3. Yeah, it's a little bit hard and a little bit tricky with writing on the computer. I'm left with 1. So, yep. So 1 would be our quotient, so that's our answer. So we have 1, that's our remaining number, so that's our numerator. And 3, which is our denominator, does not change. So we have 1 and 1/3. And then what we had before that was 1/4. Remember, it was 4/3 plus 1/4. So what I did was I changed my improper fraction to be proper. Now you can go ahead and find a common denominator, which would be 12, and you would change that. So I'm going to just change it over here. So 1/3, 1 and 1/3 plus 1/4. Okay. Common denominator we said is 12. Now with the denominator becoming 12, that is not going to affect my whole number. It is only affecting the fraction. So I'm going to keep the 1 here, and I'm going to multiply times 4. 3 times 4 is 12. Times 4, I get 4 here. So I have 1 and 4/12. Sorry if it's all close together. And how do I change this? That's going to become 4 times 3. 1 times 3, what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So I get 3/12. So let me rewrite this that way it's not too jumbled for you, okay? Let me erase over here. Or rather, I can write it up here. So let me write it up here for you guys. So we now have 1 and 4/12 plus 3/12. Again, denominators stay the same. You just add your numerators. The whole number, you're going to bring that with it. So there's nothing here. So 1 plus nothing is 1. 4 plus 3 is 7. Denominator stays the same. So 1 and 7/12. Again, if you noticed before, we had the same answer, but I just showed you 2 different ways of trying to figure it out. All right, let's show it to you on the number line. Pretty cool. Let me refresh this so that we have a better understanding here. Again, computer was messing up, so hopefully you guys got it. We have a number line. Again, I do apologize for computer glitch. Sometimes I have no control over that. All right, so we first started with 4 thirds. So I'm going to get thirds, and I'm going to do 4 of them. Let me just bring it down here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you notice, when I had 3 thirds, of course, that equals 1 whole. But notice, I'm already over. So this means I have 1 and 1/3. Let me show you a whole. I'm going to put a whole here, or a fraction tile that represents a whole. And notice, 3 thirds equals 1 whole. So I have 1 whole and 1/3. And I'm going to add a 4th to it. And notice where, when I put it, where the 4th sits next to. So 1 whole, which is 1 and 1/3, which is 4 thirds, plus 1/4 gives me 1 and 7/12. So again, that's with using manipulatives. Again, you can create manipulatives on your own. All you have to do is just simply either buy them, but I don't recommend that. If you don't have to, you can easily make it with paper. Cut out, fold paper, and then cut out a certain amount, and you can make manipulatives on your own. It's very easy to do as well. As I mentioned before, one of the reasons why I do not like automatically multiplying both different denominators together, such as 3 times 4, I don't like doing that as my first option. Reason being, let's say I had 2 different denominators of 5 and 10. If I go ahead and multiply 5 times 10, I'm going to get 50. But that's going to take me all the way to a larger number, of which then I'm going to have to probably simplify and come all the way back down. So that's one of the reasons why I don't suggest automatically multiplying the 2 different denominators together. I suggest you finding the first common multiple. And when you find that, you already have a common denominator. And then you figure out, well, how can I get from the first denominator to the equivalent fraction denominator? So how can I get from 3 to 12? How can I get from 4 in the other fraction to 12? I find that a little bit better, a little bit easier. If you would like to multiply the denominators together and then end up possibly simplifying, you're more than welcome to do that as well. But again, just make sure if you do that, you do have to figure out your numerators too. All right. So I would just go with finding the multiples. But nonetheless, I hope you found this video helpful. Again, check out my previous videos. Sorry, of course, for the screen blacking out and possibly glitching, but hopefully you got something out of it. And yeah, thank you so much. Keep watching. We'll have more videos to come. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.